understanding is somehow, miraculously, my slides have appeared up here. Thank you very much. And thank you all for joining me here this morning. And they told me that they know that my voice projects. They're going to turn up the volume here in just a moment here. Okay, there we go. So, thank you for joining me. If I were to ask you guys, how many would say that in your company, your performance management system is key in driving performance and it motivates your employees to be the best they can be? How many of you would raise your hand and say, absolutely? Okay, you guys, literally nobody is raising their hand. And that's kind of what I thought. In fact, a recent SHRM study said that 75% of HR executives felt that would rate their performance management process as a C or lower. And managers are even more critical about our process. The question is, what's wrong with the approaches that we use today, and what can we do about it? Now, imagine a world where managers and employees are energized by having performance conversations. It can happen. And in the next 18 minutes, I am going to share with you the 6 factors impacting organizations today that indicate how organizations have changed over the past decade, and why I'll bring with you the 4 most influential bodies of research or innovations that are happening in performance management that are helping organizations develop more contemporary approaches more relevant for a 21st century organization. And then I'm going to bring that all together to share with you some emerging trends and the companies that are demonstrating some of this today. So, there are many factors that are reshaping organizations today. And I was told this would have a little dot on it, and it doesn't. These first 3 factors really refer around the business environment. Growth is coming back to organizations as the economy continues its recovery. And organizations are constantly having to look forward and anticipate change based on technological innovation and business model disruption. Globalization has resulted in a great deal of growth in emerging markets, not in the United States. And this has resulted in the fact that many employees are working in globally dispersed teams, and sometimes your manager may be residing in a different country. So that presents a challenge. Increased competition means that organizations constantly have to innovate, and access to the right talent is the greatest inhibitor to growth. In fact, as Hank pointed out in his opening session, a recent study by the Conference Executive Board said that the #1 challenge faced by CEOs today is human capital, followed closely by innovation. The next 3 factors up here really have more to do with the work and the workforce. Given the pace of change today, organizations need to constantly adapt and reprioritize what types of things that they're working on. So the goals that we set at the beginning of the year are often shifting and changing based on changing business needs. More and more today, people are working on teams. In fact, many organizations have moved to matrix work structures, making collaboration across boundaries more important than ever before. And last but not least, we have the workforce. Not only are employees dispersed geographically, but the type of worker that we have in organizations today is fundamentally different from when performance management was first invented. Performance management was invented in the industrial era. Today's knowledge workers are motivated by an internal sense of fulfillment, by doing interesting work, and by developing their own expertise. And then we have the millennials, who are constantly searching for more feedback and coaching so that they can have a greater impact. So what are the implications of these organization dynamics for performance management. Let me share a few with you today, and I'm going to start with goal setting. Our typical process of setting goals annually simply is out of pace with the needs of a business today. And setting goals individually with our employees may not really necessarily be appropriate. Employees are collaborating on goals together. Managers have typically been the sole source of feedback for an employee. And in today's work environment where people are geographically dispersed, the manager may not be co-located with their employees, so they may not be the best source of input. Also, in very technical jobs, it may be that the peers have better insight into the skills and abilities of their coworkers than their managers sometimes. So maybe there are other sources of input that we should be considering. In matrix work structures, employees have two managers. And our traditional processes have never dealt well with inputs from multiple managers. Think about the situations, you guys have all experienced this, where you have more than one manager over a year, right? We're restructuring, we're changing, our manager leaves, we get a new manager. And how do we deal with the input from multiple people in that situation? And how often is it that a new manager is left with the responsibility of providing a review on an employee they don't know very well? So we need to invite more sources of feedback. The process of providing feedback annually or semi-annually will not motivate and retain top performers. And bottling up feedback for an end-of-the-year process means a lot of information gets lost along the way. So we really need to move from periodic feedback to ongoing coaching for performance. And lastly, I come to language and labeling. Today's knowledge workers do not want their performance to be managed by anybody. It is not a good term. Okay, so we just have to think about the term performance management and what it says to our employees. And then the process of labeling people through the evaluation process means that a large number of people who aren't at the highest ratings may be disenfranchised or disengaged by the actual rating that they get. So we need to think about that labeling and what that means for employees. So let me now move on to the four most influential pieces of research. Absolutely nothing new, but it is some of the most consistent, persuasive pieces of research that we have out there about influencing performance. And what we know is this: setting specific, difficult goals motivates performance more than setting no goals or setting do your best goals. For motivation to occur, employees need to personally commit to the goals that they are trying to achieve. And they need to receive ongoing feedback on progress against that goal for motivation to occur. So let me pause there. This is where the whole process breaks down. We do not provide feedback frequently enough for goals to be motivating. And that's where this process we have breaks down. Now, let me point out here that nowhere in this theory of research does it say that rating people on goals is a source of motivation. Okay, that's not part of that. The field of neuroscience has been contributing to our understanding about how to lead and manage employees over about the last 5 years. So every 5 seconds, our brain is automatically computing whether or not we're in a threat or reward state. Unfortunately, the performance management process is filled with elements that create a threat state. And what happens then is that the creativity centers of our brain automatically turn off and shut down to new information in a protection state. David Rock has created created a model to demonstrate or talk about how an individual responds to a performance conversation. So it gets a rating. Their status may be threatened by that rating and how it compares to prior evaluations that they got. And since the one thing we know is that all employees believe that they are above average, a mathematical impossibility, we know that a majority of employees are going to be threatened by their actual rating. Change creates uncertainty. So any change in how we've been rated in the past will create a stress response. Bottling that feedback for the end of the year performance conversation creates a great deal of uncertainty in what's going to happen in that conversation. Our brain likes stability and control, and it likes to be in the driver's seat. In a performance review conversation, the manager's in the driver's seat, and that reduces an individual's level of autonomy and is a perceived threat. And we very quickly compute in our brain how much we're alike those people around us. And if we get a rating from a manager that we really like and it's less than stellar, it will threaten our perceived relationships. New research in our work. And she refers to these two different mindsets as the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. She argues that many managers and some companies like an Enron, they emphasize that fixed mindset. Employees are hired and compensated because they don't think that fixed mindset employees avoid criticism and they are threatened by the success of other people. So these employees are unlikely to help their peers be successful. Now, in contrast, growth mindset employees, they embrace challenges and they work really hard when they're faced with goals because they see that as a path to personal growth. They seek out all types of feedback as a point of learning, and they want to grow and be their best. And they are energized by the success, and they want to grow and be their best. And they are energized by this research has huge implications for employees so that they develop a growth mindset. The McKinsey Global Institute has done some research and said that 2/3 of the value creation that comes from social technologies lie in their ability to improve communication and collaboration within the organization. And they estimate that companies that leverage social technologies can actually improve the productivity of knowledge workers by 20 to 25%. So tools like Yammer and Chatter, Work.com, and here 7Piece can help improve an organization's agility and collaboration by helping employees understand how we're all performing against common goals and providing us with information that we need to know when we need to shift and change. What influence accountability to the team? So, we need a performance management process that is more relevant to a knowledge worker. And we need to move from managing performance to inspiring performance. So here are going to be the trends and the trend-setting companies that we're watching today that are demonstrating how companies are executing on some of these concepts. Companies like Gap, ceasing or eliminating documentation in the performance review process. Yeah, that sends shivers down the spines of most HR professionals and lawyers. But they're doing it for two main reasons. One, managers spend way too much time documenting performance and not not enough time actually having a dialogue with their employees doesn't serve the legal action that we would like to take with an employee. Now, virtually all of these companies have eliminated ratings. And the reason companies are eliminating ratings are to put more emphasis on ongoing dialogue and to minimize any unintended consequences of rating a majority of your employees meets expectations. A rating that I will tell you does not give people the warm fuzzies, okay? The concept of looking forward and coaching for performance versus looking backward and evaluating performance is another significant shift that we're seeing. This places less emphasis on evaluation and more emphasis on providing employees with the skills and the information that they need to be successful. In a recent benchmarking study that I did, literally every company that I talked to said that they're looking to improve the coaching and development aspects of their performance management process because they saw that as a key to motivating and retaining top talent. This is also a trend that really supports that growth mindset. A number of projects that I've worked on recently.
That you keep doing that is most important based on their goals and what's important to the organization next year. Focus on those three things. Then, what are three things the employee did that he or she really should do differently? Either what area could he or she grow or develop, meaning they've never done that, it's a skill that they want to get or take on, something they want to learn that's new, or something that really needs to get corrected or fixed. Three things, not more. Now, I'm not saying you can't address more than three things in the appraisal, but I want you to consider that people can only focus on a couple things at a time. If you want your employees to be efficient, effective, get better, keep doing the things they do well, give them little things to focus on at a time. You can always meet again next month, or in 90 days, or 6 months, and add more. The other thing is this. I'm going to be honest. I worked in corporate America for 12 years before I started my business. I was a driven, type A, successful careerist, and I did well. And still, I never had a performance appraisal where I didn't want to quit the next day. It can be a very discouraging process. And more so, I think employees, even if they hear 10 good things that they did well, and one thing that was negative, we all know that we go home thinking about the negative. So you want a process for your employees that they can really take in what you're saying, and they feel encouraged and more engaged, not discouraged. I would suggest to do that you really help people focus. You point out the positive, and you point out the negative, which is often called constructive, which is just a nice word for negative. But people do need both. But keep it simple and keep it pretty succinct and short. The other thing is this. The best feedback is specific. And I have to be candid, most feedback I see is actually useless. I call it Captain Crunch. It's like puffed children's breakfast cereal with milk. It's like moving air around the room with a little noise mixed in. So if you're telling your employees they're doing well, they had a great year, they need to be more assertive, more aggressive, they need to work harder, they need to be more detail-oriented, they need to be more complete, they need to be more accurate, they need to be more timely. None of that is actually feedback. That is fluff, right? It's vague. I call it an attribute, like a descriptor. Blonde hair, short, tall. Those are descriptions. They're not actually feedback. Feedback is a description plus a verb, meaning what did the person do? The more specific the feedback, the more helpful it is. So when I know exactly what I did well, I can replicate it. When I know exactly what didn't go well, I can change it. But when I'm not sure what you're talking about, I don't know what to do, and all I do is get really, really defensive. Human beings are going to get defensive when they get feedback, regardless of how well it was delivered and how nice and how softly. They will get less defensive when it's specific. When I can see, like almost like on a DVD or a video, when I can see the event go by, when you describe it to me so clearly that I can remember it, like, oh yeah, you're right, I was late that day. I remember that. I did turn that in late. I did take a vacation day on the busiest day of the year. I did wear something a little crazy in front of a customer. I can remember it. I'm not going to like hearing it, but I'm going to be able to absorb it, and I will get less defensive. So you can't prevent your employees from being defensive. When they get negative feedback, we all get defensive. I call that human. But you can reduce their defensiveness by being extremely specific. To be specific, you're again going to have to watch your employees' performance, and you're going to have to get feedback both from them and from other people, and that can be a little time consuming. I'm going to recommend you do that throughout the year, like I said. So throughout the year, just call your customers, your internal customers, and ask for feedback on your employees, and talk about what you're getting throughout the year. That's the ideal case. The performance review process is called review because it should be the year in review. It is not a preview, it is not a trailer. So ideally, when you meet with your employees, you should be talking about things you've already talked about. So a good appraisal sounds something like this. Thanks for coming in today. We're going to briefly review last year, the year that's ending, because we've had a lot of conversation about your performance. You know what's working and what's not. So we're going to wrap that up, we're going to review it, and then we're going to plan for next year. And a really solid appraisal, empowering and inspiring even, you're going to focus a little bit on the past and a lot about the future. Now, you can do that if you've been meeting with your people regularly and giving feedback, and a lot of us have not. Let's just admit it, we are busy, we are human, and we have our own jobs to do. So sometimes we don't get to give feedback as often, as frequently, and as quickly as we would like. So you're going to maybe be in the position where you're going to give feedback that's not a review. In fact, the employee's going to be surprised and maybe a little frustrated because maybe it happened in January and you're addressing it in July or August. That breaks trust, so be careful how you do it. You may want to say something like, I've got some feedback for you. I wish I'd given it to you sooner. Next year, we're going to meet more regularly and I'm going to give you more regular feedback. But for now, I think it's important that you have this information. You can do that, but know that employees get a little suspicious. Like, why didn't you tell me 6 months ago? And they can break trust and they feel a little betrayed. So be careful what you choose to address. If a behavior or performance has been happening over time and you haven't addressed it and it's frustrating to you, you may want to just consider not addressing it during the appraisal. If it's really a problem, they're going to do it again. And I know that sounds a little crazy. I call that a missed opportunity. If it's an issue, they're going to do it again. Just watch for it, not like a stalker. But just pay attention when it happens, address it. So far, we have gather feedback throughout the year if you can. Gather feedback from the employee themselves and also from their internal or external customers. Make some notes, be extremely specific. More specific, the more actionable, the more helpful, the more trust you build. Because specificity builds authenticity and trust. Vague does not. You're not going to write Captain Crunch, you're going to write behaviors. So rather than be more timely, you could say something like, turn everything in when it's due or before. Rather than produce more accurate work, you could say, check your work, be sure to spell check, have somebody proofread, and make sure that things are error-free before you turn them in. If you want to say to someone they have a bad attitude, that's going to create a lot of sensitivity and a lot of defensiveness. So you could say something like, you typically look unhappy at work. You're frowning, throw stuff around, you're a sigher, and it's creating an atmosphere in the office that's a little bit negative. My recommendation is, if you're upset at work, just take it outside and take a walk around the block.